Great, and we're live. So welcome everybody to this remote interview. My name is Lisette and I'm interviewing people and companies doing great things remotely. And today on the line, I have Patrick Linton. You're the co-founder and CEO at Bolton Remote. And when I looked at your website, there is this great quote that says, oh, it's changed. We've challenged traditional outsourcing to give you everything you need and nothing you don't. So we're going to totally get into this. But first of all, and you're in Singapore right now, based in Singapore. But let's start with the opening question, which is, what does your virtual office look like? And then we'll get into all of about what you do. So Patrick, what does your virtual office look like?
Well, thanks for having me on. This is fun. I've been following the podcast for a while, so always learn something new. So first of all, I work remotely probably about 50% of the time. I am based in Singapore, but we've got the majority of our employees in Manila, in the Philippines. We've got 2 offices there with about 150 employees. And our customers are mostly in the US, Australia, Europe, and of course, Singapore. So kind of remote, face-to-face, these 2 things for me are integrated pretty interchangeably. My virtual office itself is, I work at home, I work on my phone, I work in the airport, and usually I try to have as few physical tools as possible, and mainly focus on using the right core productivity tools and communication tools with my team back in the Philippines.
Okay, so let me ask then, why the Philippines? Why would somebody outsource to the Philippines?
Yes, I mean, we call ourselves a sort of next generation outsourcing platform. The short description is that we help companies fill roles in their organization, and not just fill one role, a one-off, part-time freelancer type of a role, but a full-time, dedicated, long-term, remote employee that will be working remotely side by side with the team back home, wherever that is, typically in a high cost of labor location, like Silicon Valley, like New York City. We also help these same companies retain people over time and build larger teams, because these are things that are very challenging to do when it comes to having a remote, dispersed workforce. And so these services that we do, yes, it's outsourcing in many ways, but in another way, it's more of an alternative to going onto an online staffing platform. So, for example, you've probably used Upwork or Freelancer or some of the many platforms that have sprung up in the last couple of years. We're more of an alternative to going there, trying to find somebody for a full-time role, trying to find somebody who can be part of your team, which is very, very difficult to do if you've ever tried to do that. I think those are great marketplaces for tasks, for bits and pieces of work that you might need, especially for early stage startups, solo entrepreneurs, et cetera. But when it comes to starting to actually fill a position on your team, fill a job, or build that team, scale that team. Let's say you're a fast growing tech company, you just received Series A investment, you need to blow out a team overnight. These platforms don't exactly make it easy to do that. And so we're a service built for that particular market.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, I have used Upwork and a number of these online platforms, and it's true. It's mostly task-based stuff. And actually, when I look for work as well, it's mostly like, oh, I need a design for X, and then that's it. And then, yeah,
it's great. I mean, and freelancers who are delivering that as well, they're a little bit more entrepreneurial. They like the fact, regardless of where they are in the world, they like the fact that they can do a piece of work here, a piece of work there, manage a client roster of, say, 10 to 15 clients that they work for on a regular basis. I think that's a different type of individual than somebody who is more career-minded, somebody who is looking for a full-time job. And our specialty is finding those people, attracting those people, retaining those people, in cost competitive talent markets like the Philippines. And that's one of the reasons we're in the Philippines, is because the talent pool is incredible. The English language is a big plus, but it's not just that. It's a great workforce in terms of attitudes, skill sets. It's a maturing talent market as well. So what that means is over the last 10 to 15 years, we've seen a lot of big companies, the IBMs of the world, come in, invest in training the workforce. So you've got a really great pool of talent to draw from. And we work with small businesses, startups, who often need specialists to come in, join the team, hit the ground running. And that labor market right now really provides that access that we and our customers need.
Yeah, it sounds ideal. So you've hit on a number of reasons of why people go to outsourcing. And I have cost, of course. You know, that it's a huge savings. Companies can't ignore the fact that somebody in the Philippines is going to cost less than somebody in the Bay Area, for example. So there's a cost. Is that the main reason that people outsource?
I mean, labor arbitrage has been around for a while now, and because
I haven't heard this term before. Sorry to stop you. Labor arbitrage. Can you?
Yeah, just balancing out your workforce based on cost of living differentials. So, I mean, this concept of cutting costs, building workforces in countries that do have a lower cost of living, lower average pay, et cetera. This has been around for a while. So to us, it's almost a no-brainer nowadays. The internet is strong. The tools are there. The perfect storm of being able to finally be effective and work remotely with people around the world. This is really been a recent phenomenon. And so for us, the cost thing is really a no-brainer. That's one tiny part of the value of building remote teams, of hiring or outsourcing, building outsource teams, whatever you want to call it. We think it's really more about access to talent itself. And if you go into cities, I travel a lot. I go to San Francisco, New York, Sydney, wherever some of the most, if you Google some of the most tight labor markets in the world, these cities will pop up time and time again. And there's incredible talent there. It's very expensive, and it's also there's just not a lot of it. So I'm in Singapore, and there's some great people here, but companies really do struggle in cities like this to hire a lot of people, especially if they're growing really fast, which the companies we work with tend to be doing.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, especially if you're a startup and all of a sudden you get funding and you have to build, you're not going to find all those people in whatever city you're in. I mean, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, and you know, we come in and we have a conversation and we say, listen, if you already can't find somebody within the morning commute, if you're already struggling with finding somebody inside of your zip code, then everything else is remote. So if everything else is remote, whether that's somebody in the next state, somebody in the next country, you know, you hear these terms nearshore versus offshore. From our perspective, it's all remote. And so once you accept and realize that it is all remote after that, it's a smart business decision to go to the most value for money locations in the world to bring people onto your team.
Yeah, I can imagine. So I want to talk about what people struggle with when they outsource specifically. But the first thing I want to start with, because it came up when you said nearshore versus offshore, is time zones. Everybody asks me about time zones, and I can imagine the Philippines and Australia. That's very doable. I think it's an hour difference. I'm not sure, but Philippines and Europe, I was starting, but Philippines and the U.S. that's a big difference. So, what advice do you give for people, or what do you see with that?
You know, we in our particular model and our employees and people that we bring on board, we do work 24/7. We work in every time zone in the world. So we we do find that people have different preferences. I mean, some people may prefer a daytime shift versus a nighttime shift, and we try to match people's preference with what they want, and it may be for some reason like, hey, the traffic is really bad at normal 9 to 5 commute times, so it's really convenient if I work UK hours where I come in at 2 or 3 in the afternoon and go home around 11 or 12 p.m. right, a.m. And so for us, we work around the time zone issue. I would say that time zones can be challenging depending on the country that you're operating in and with. And I think eventually the way that things will shift is that people will learn to overlap more and more with each other versus one side just latching onto the time zone of the other side. And we see this more and more. I mean, we see customers of ours in California realizing that, hey, this is if they don't need a 24/7 function. This is if, let's say, they just have 1 or 2 people. Hey, our afternoon is, our early afternoon is morning in the Philippines, and there's a good 3-4 hours overlap that we can have with the team. That's good enough. Let's do that. Whereas I think in the past, typically it would be, okay, these are U.S. operating hours, and this is when we work, and that's it, right? But that comes with awareness, I think, as well of global workforces being a normal part of business.
Yeah, and it seems like the whole 9 to 5 thing, when you start working with remote teams, it kind of gets obliterated because it tends to be in the way rather than helping. I mean, if you have this set 9 to 5 structure, and there's tons of people that like to work late in the evening or early in the morning or for whatever the reason is. Yeah. You mentioned the commute. And I know in lots of big cities, the commute is really terrible. And I've heard that the commute in the Philippines can be especially bad. I want to talk about that for a little bit. What have you seen?
Yeah, traffic can be pretty challenging. Our eventual goal is to really all the people who work for us and who work on projects for our clients work inside of co-working spaces that we run and manage. So we do like the office-based model. We're not a huge fan of working from home. And probably our version of remote is country and culture specific. So whereas I think working from home in maybe the US, where you might have a nice big home office, you've got great internet, the power's not going out, that could be a really great way to save time on not commuting and to be productive. That's not always as attractive in places like the Philippines. Even in spite of the traffic, just because internet connectivity at home might not be up to what is needed to even do a video chat. Power can go in and out. There's just additional risks that come from working from home in a place like the Philippines, and that'll change over time, obviously. But for now, we believe in the office-based model. And so back to your question about traffic, we try to make sure that people's commutes are optimized. We find that we do have data that we look at, and we do try to understand the optimal maximum commute time. And we also look at things like what method, how are you commuting? What types of public transportation are you taking, or your own car, et cetera. We do look at all these things because these are all part of the risk profiling that we do. And nobody wants to sit in traffic for 4 hours. So we have most of our people living within a reasonable distance to our office.
So you have co-working spaces that you've set up and are managing for your employees. I think that's really interesting because I can imagine a lot. I mean, I know the majority of remote workers get quite lonely working at home by themselves, and lots of people love to be around others. So a co-working space really works out.
Yeah. Well, I would say in a lot of countries, and especially in the Philippines, which is a culture of community and connecting with your coworkers and your friends, and really that's such an important part of what attracts people to work at an organization is their peers. In a place like that, for us, making sure that we create the right community that is fun and people can connect with people doing all sorts of different things. That's a huge reason to have these offices where people can work in, because I think without that, we've heard stories. We've done interviews with people who have done work from home jobs and are just itching to get back into an office environment, simply for the reason you mentioned, which is, it's pretty lonely working from home. And I'm an extrovert as well, so that's why I think I max out around 50%.
Right.
I need to go see people and be face to face and enjoy working with people. So I like a combination of the two.
And if I want to get back to the challenges at some point on what people struggle with outsourcing, because I think that's an interesting question. But now that you've mentioned the hybrid version where you have partially in the office and partially remote, what is it there that you what do you struggle with there? Because I've heard that people find that challenging.
Yeah, I mean, so our definition of remote, like I mentioned earlier, is really about not being face to face and understanding the different structure and different processes that need to be put in place, because not everybody is sitting around the same table. So some people might be, and in our case with teams that we have, they are a co-located team, but they're also working with another team on the other side of the world who is also co-located. And you still have to set up the same types of remote structure, processes, tools, et cetera, that you would if you had two people, one working from home somewhere, one working from home somewhere else. And so for us, the second that things become like that, where you've got these two teams on the other side of the world, that's where all these new considerations start to happen when it comes to managing and working for a manager both ways.
Indeed. Okay, so let's get back to the question. What do you see people struggling with when they first go to outsourcing?
I think as long as they've made the mental hurdle that, hey, it makes sense to have a global workforce, as long as they're already kind of past that point and understanding the benefits and why this makes sense. The first thing is really management. If you're a bad manager locally, you're going to be an even worse one remotely. And then you throw in a different culture, you throw in a different country, potentially different time zones, and it's going to be really, really difficult. So what we try to do is, there are learnings that come from doing this over time. There are learnings, even if you are a good manager, let's say you've never managed across cultures, let's say you've never managed remotely, where you've never met the person face to face. These are things that you can learn by trial and error and just, over time figure that out. Or what we do, and part of our service is helping companies fast track that and kind of, move to the front of the line, not have to go through all those learnings, because we're there to absorb, we're there to support, we're there to say, hey, these are the 5 important things that you need to look at in this particular case. And so I think with that is the biggest challenge always, is just, okay, how is this different than what I'm doing now, managing my team now, managing my people, and what do I need to do?
I really like that, actually. It's because a lot of people are going to reinvent the wheel over and over again when they first go to outsourcing. So actually, by going through a company like yours, they get all of your experience and knowledge. Like, you're going to say, okay, here's the 5 road bumps you're about to hit. Let me help you with those. I think that's probably a huge benefit of going through you guys. So.
Yeah. And I think we also, it's both ways, right? It's also with our employees that we hire and making sure that they are, remote ready, that they're going to be now working for a manager on the other side of the world. And there are things that they need to do to ensure that they are visible, that they understand how they're being measured in terms of what does success look like, these are things that you have to do anyway. If you're an employee, if you're working for a manager, you should do that anyway. But they become amplified if somebody is remote, because you just don't see them.
How do you know if somebody is remote ready when you hire them? What are some of your telltale signs?
I mean, we hire for attitude first. We hire for skills second, and then everything else we can teach. So I mean, we obviously we like to. I mean, most of the people we would hire and their generation anyway will be used to using, remotely communicating on apps, chat, social media, Skype, etc. So I mean, that comfort level is already there. For us, it's less about, hey, what tools do you use? That's less important than how you use them and why you use them. So for us, we have a framework, and we help after people join us, if they check all of our other boxes and they're really a great fit for us, they fit our culture and community, and they're a good fit with our client, then it's the path to excelling in that type of a remote working relationship. And pieces of our framework will have things like, decades ago, you come into the office early and you stay late, and that's probably factored in somewhere into your productivity report. They say always stays late, right? And subjectively, management probably thinks that guy's got promotion written all over him. And now all of a sudden that's out the door, right? Unless you're pinging, you're on chat and you're saying, hey, I'm still here working late. Hey, I'm still here working late. Unless you're doing that, there's no way to see that. So it comes down to really focusing on results, focusing on what is actually getting done. And we help people set up that structure in the first place, set up that process in the first place, the feedback loop. All these things are set up at the beginning, and then we help monitor those over time to ensure success with them.
Yeah, I can imagine it was the first in, last out was the way to go in the corporate world before. And now it's, what did you get done? Which is
exactly.
Which is even better. And I really liked that you said, being visible. So I call that myself working out loud and setting the expectations, like what is success? I think that's a really important one. How do you help people do that? I don't know if you can think of a story or of an example of how you've set expectations for both the client and the employee.
I would say one great thing to do, and this may or may not fall perfectly into setting expectations, but I think it relates to it, is if you have a meeting with somebody, it's usually over a call or a video chat in a remote setting, and especially if it's a call, there's not always the facial cues to pick up on. There may be silences where you're not sure if somebody's nodding or shaking their head. There are a lot of things that are open to interpretation. And so what we do is we train that after every single conversation that takes place like that is not documented, that is a verbal or video conversation, you follow up summarizing all the key points. It doesn't have to be a meeting minutes, but just follow up, summarize all those key points for confirmation. That can be in an email, that can be in Slack, that can be in whatever tool is being used. The principle is the same. It's saying, because we're remote, I'm going to make sure that I'm 100% absolutely clear that this is what we discussed and these are the next steps that we're taking.